Hello, my name is Edmonson, and for my term project, I decided to research the history of pollution and the negative effects on our society today. So according to 11 Facts About Pollution, each year, 1.2 trillion gallons of untreated sewage, stormwater, and industrial waste are dumped into the U.S. water. This is especially alarming now, as people around the world are finally witnessing firsthand the negative effects of our actions, both on themselves and their environment. And although there are solutions to the current predicament, many people are still reluctant to recognize the severity of the situation. Therefore, it is particularly crucial for our society to teach the importance of environmental preservation so that the current conditions do not worsen. Our society is based upon the idea of industrialism. This system came into use mainly during the Industrial Revolution, which began in the late 1700s. This is when the world was finally starting to recover from the effects of the Black Plague, which resulted in over 75 million casualties. This sudden growth, as a result of the Industrial Revolution, is well represented by Emily Filk, who in her article, The Environmental Impacts of Industrialization, stated, the planet's population exploded, reaching 1 billion by 1800 and then doubling again by 1926. By the beginning of the 21st century, it had grown again to 6 billion. These statistics are important to recognize, as the exponential growth of the Earth's population over time is alarming and shows no sign of slowing. In most cases, it was the use of coal that spurred the industrial boom. At the time, people were not concerned with the potential consequences of their actions, the burning of coal and the use of fossil fuels, for example. They were instead focused on mass producing as much as possible, as fast as possible. Simply put by OpenLearn, in the space of less than 100 years between the 18th and 19th centuries, first Britain, then several other countries completely transformed the nature of their economies. This information is important because it explains the direct impact of the revolution on economic and population growth. So how does industrial-based production lead to a polluted environment? Well, there are 4 main points of impact when it comes to industrialization: air, water, soil, and habitat. The impact point with the greatest consequences, however, is air. The burning of the coal leads to smog and other toxins being released into the atmosphere. As the amount of pollutants in the atmosphere increases over time, it leads to the slow diminishing of the air quality. Water is another natural resource threatened by big industries. Runoff from factories can seep into local waterways and contaminate both habitats and crucial resources necessary for the survival of humans and certain species. In the end, while the Industrial Revolution in the late 18th century was not the first time pollutants were released due to human activity, it was the beginning of a new era in which mass production is the top priority. As the population around the globe grew, so did the economy. The almost exponential growth led to several advances in technology which made the food production process more feasible. For example, the signs of economic growth were apparent in the United States. Beginning in the last half of the 19th century, small coastal cities began urbanizing. These rapid changes also influenced population growth, as both citizens and immigrants were drawn towards the areas with more job opportunities. According to urbanization and its changes by OpenStax College, the amount of people living in New York City between 1860 and 1900 more than tripled, and Chicago grew to be over 16 times its original size. These statistics are crucial when recognizing the extent of population growth in just a 40-year period. Over time, each city developed their own characteristics and adapted their own unique industries based on what they were founded for. In Chicago, it was meat packaging. In Pittsburgh, it was steel. In Detroit, by the 1950s, was defined by the automobiles it mass-produced. Strategically, almost all major cities in the U.S. at the time were located near a major waterway. This allowed for the quick and practical transportation of the goods they produced. However, these urban cities had the potential to pollute waterways in several ways. The Living Lakes Partnership is an internal network and partnership whose mission is to enhance the protection, restoration, and rehabilitation of lakes, wetlands, and other fresh bodies of water around the world. They explain that the runoff from the streets contain oil, rubber, heavy metals, and other toxins from automobiles and factories. Additionally, untreated or poorly treated sewage can contain bacteria, nitrates, and other pollutants. This is clear evidence that the goal of finding ways to make life more convenient undermine the responsibility of environmental preservation. Overall, the surge of industrial production began in the late 18th century and has grown exponentially ever since. So how are those living in small communities responsible for the ever-expanding threat of pollution? Well, although urban city areas are the main source of contamination, small towns can also have an impact. The absence of factories does not necessarily mean the absence of toxins. Isabel Robinson, in her article, What is Localized Pollution?, wrote that most significant sources of air pollution are road transport. Carbon and nitrogen dioxide, very harmful chemicals, are emitted from the exhaust pipes of cars and trucks and released into the atmosphere. It may seem that smaller cars do not represent a threat to the air quality. However, this could not be further from the truth. According to Hedges & Company, about 284.5 million vehicles are registered in the U.S. each year. Smaller cars may not produce as much pollution, but when all the driven vehicles are considered, the amount of toxins released is dangerous. This same concept of snowballing could be seen in the case of littering. The amount of candy wrappers and pop bottles adds up. The trash not only endangers local wildlife, but diminishes the beauty of nature. Although individuals have little to say in the activities or decisions of every country, each person has the power to make an impact in their own community. The movement of the conditions of our local forests and lakes is a small yet significant step towards conservation. If environmental preservation is so important, why are some people reluctant to take action? While we are beginning to see the consequences of centuries of industry, the worst effects are yet to come. This is why some people do not think global warming prevention is a priority, and why it is crucial to educate the younger generation. According to Anya Kametes of NPR.org, 80% of American parents believe climate change should be taught. Additionally, it was determined that 86% of teachers agree. This data is a prime example of the reason pollution production has not slowed. In fact, almost a third of teachers believe that teaching global warming would result in parent complaints. However, it is of paramount importance that we incorporate the topic of global warming into our curriculums. The negative effects of human-caused pollution are irreversible and will worsen in the decades to come. One of the biggest threats to our planet is the increase in temperatures. According to NASA, because human-induced warming is superimposed on naturally varying climate, the temperature rise has not been and will not be smooth and uniform across the country over time. As a result of this planet-wide warming, glaciers will continue to melt and the sea level will rise, destroying coastal towns and cities around the world. In addition, the increase in heat means the increase of energy in the atmosphere. This will result in more sudden and vigorous storms ravaging the coast. These ocean-sized cities are not the only victims of the changes, as droughts are expected to devastate almost every location. These heat waves can last days or even weeks. We lack the technology and resources necessary to prevent any of these catastrophes after they occur. So what is already being done to prevent the incoming threats? Nations are wrangling over a new global treaty on climate change. The National Public Radio's news staff, in their article, What Countries Are Doing to Tackle Climate Change, explained that some countries are focusing on curbing deforestation and boosting renewable implication. In conclusion, global warming and climate change are not a huge issue at the moment. However, we have enough evidence to prove that the planet's conditions will continue to worsen in the coming years. People cannot rely entirely on our governments to solve the problem. After all, the students are the ones who will have to face the worst consequences. They must be the ones to make the first step. Thank you.